As the time until Election Day ticks down, the conversation about the candidates' behavior and healthcare costs is heating up.
Both important topics have been tightly connected and highly controversial. To help us break it down, we've invited two people who know the ins and outs of politics in Minnesota.
Brian McClung and Katharine Tinucci from public relations firm MZA and Company join us. Brian is the former press secretary and deputy chief of staff to Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty. Katharine was the campaign manager and press secretary to Governor Mark Dayton.
Well, this campaign has obviously been riddled with controversies. I think that's the understatement of perhaps the year. What, in your opinion, is the bigger October surprise? Trump's Access Hollywood tape or the latest in the Clinton email investigation?
Yeah, good luck with that.
Good luck.
Why don't you start, Katharine?
Go.
Yeah.
Well, it may come as no surprise that I think that Donald Trump's, the tape of Donald Trump talking about women the way he did was a bigger surprise, although in some ways not a surprise, just knowing what we know about him as a person. We've been talking about Hillary Clinton's emails for more than a year. I think that people certainly have opinions about it, but I think she has answered the question. She has answered it over and over and over, and I don't think that there's what more. I mean, like,
you think it's baked in?
I absolutely think it's baked in.
And Brian,
this latest thing is such a surprise because it's so nebulous.
But there's no thing. There's no thing.
we don't know if there is or not.
That almost makes it worse, right? And so, of course, of all things, the campaign comes back to Anthony Weiner, right? So who would have thought
as we all knew it would.
Right? So, and I think that the October surprise this year is that there's a surprise almost every day, right? So we kind of have this rolling set of surprises. Right. But I think what's interesting is that after the Trump tapes and now after Hillary's email investigation being restarted, I think we're almost back to where we were before. After the Trump tapes, Hillary had kind of taken about an 11 to 12 point lead overall. Now that has shrunk again. It was sliding. As long as Trump was staying quiet, it was sliding.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because Mike Pence said today it's time for Republicans to come home. Are they doing that?
Well, that's not an easy ask at this point after Trump has gone so far from what is expected of a Republican candidate for president. I think that's a really hard ask to get them to come back at this point.
Yeah, but it's where he was faltering, right? And in the national polls, you're seeing that Hillary really had consolidated the Democrat base and Trump still was lagging. And I think this does give Republicans a reason to say, she's a crook. We cannot vote for her.
Okay, so your former boss, is he coming back?
Said 2 weeks ago that Trump should step aside. I mean, is he coming home?
Well, I haven't had a chance to talk to him since this, but I would say no. I would say for me as well. I mean, I'm a Republican who never has supported Donald Trump, and I'm not going to. I'm not voting for Donald Trump on Election Day. And so I think I'm going to vote for Evan McMullin, or as my 4-year-old son calls him, Egg McMuffin. So it's a little confusing. But I mean, so there are some of us Republicans who have just said all along, look, this guy just doesn't do it for us.
There are 20 million people,
but it's getting closer.
Yeah, 20 million people have already cast ballots.
That is true, and so in some ways, that is why this is baked in. But what Brian just said is also really important. 6 months ago, we saw that most of voters said they were supporting the candidate they were supporting because they hated the other one. Now, that's changed for Hillary Clinton. Her supporters are now saying they're voting for Hillary because they want Hillary to be president, not just because they don't like Trump. She has shored up her support, and I think that that's not going to change now.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, another big topic. All week, our state's top leaders have traded insults and accusations over that sudden spike in health premiums. Open enrollment begins Tuesday. Katharine, what are they going to do? I mean...
Well, the governor has a proposal. He has something. He came out. He said... The governor said, I understand this is a problem. I hear you, people of Minnesota. We need to fix this. And so he is the only one who has come out with a plan in this past week to fix it immediately.
Well, Brian, he's the guy who said the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable.
Right, and so the governor admitted that this is not working. Of course, the governor is the person that brought this to Minnesota. He signed an executive order on day one of his administration to put Minnesota into Obamacare. So now 67% increases on top of 17% increase the year before, on top of 45% 4% increase the year before that. Democrats own this. It has become the #1 issue on the campaign trail at the state legislative level.
All right. Katharine Tinucci, you have been and you work with Governor Dayton. Did he make a mistake? He's the star of every Republican candidate's ad that's out there by saying the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable.
I think being honest with the people of Minnesota is never a mistake, and that is what we saw the governor do. He was honest about the reality of the situation. Now, the benefits of the Affordable Care Act are undeniable, and if Republicans had their way, all they would do is roll back and repeal. They have not once offered a solution to the problems that we're facing.
Now, we're coming to the open enrollment, and there's going to be a lot of legislative bickering over this, and there might be a special session. Here is what both leaders said last week about this controversy.
He ought to have a command center set up 24/7 with 1,000 people in it doing everything they can to solve this problem every minute of the day until he's got it solved.
But the Affordable Care Act must be significantly improved. It is essential that next year the U.S. Congress and the Minnesota legislature set aside their talking points and attack ads and work cooperatively together to solve these current problems and restore the promise of the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, what Governor Dayton just said is that Republicans and Democrats have to work together for both this temporary fix and next year in Congress in Washington. The odds of that happening, Brian McClung?
Well, they're pretty slim, right? But here's the thing.
Zero?
On Tuesday, November 1st, open enrollment starts. And what the Democrats have done is brought us a 67% increase in your health insurance premiums and now caps
But only
on
those in the individual market.
which is 250,000 Minnesotans. I mean, this is not a small issue. And so you also have caps on enrollment. So for the first time, they're telling people, call and get in right away. MNsure, the website, the call center had all kinds of problems. Does anybody think that they're ready? Does anybody think that they're prepared this time around?
We're going to see this. And Katharine, do you think this has an effect on the legislative races?
You know, we've heard Republicans in the last cycle in 2014 and in 2012 talk about this nonstop. It did not have the effect that they expected because I think the voters are smart enough to know that blocking and repealing is not the same as fixing a problem. And unless Republicans offer a real solution, it's not going to work this time.
Well,
We'll see if anybody can agree
I
to
can't
a
wait for
solution.
this
Yeah.
next week.
And there are Republican solutions, but at this stage, right, everybody has a different idea of what those solutions are
with the
going to
election.
be.
Well, Brian McClung and Katharine Tanucci, thank you so much for coming in. and
Really good
joining
to
us
have
this
you.
evening.
Thanks for having us.
All right, folks, we'll be right back.